Hi, Mariah. I'm Beverly. It's nice to officially meet you. I am currently one of the assistant coaches at Gotham FC in the NWSL. And previous to that, I played 10 years in the league. And I'm super excited to talk to you today and learn more about you and discuss mental health as a whole. So yeah, let me hear all about you.
Yeah, so I'm so excited to be here as well, and so excited that Athletes for Hope could connect us. So, a little bit of background about me. I was a collegiate rower at Notre Dame for the past 4 years, and I graduated this May. So, the transition away from sport has definitely been something that is more recent in my life. I haven't even, I think in 2 weeks it'll officially be a year celebration from graduating. So, very
Wow.
excited to be here. I can kick it off with a little bit more about me, like what got me into rowing and athletics, and then eventually we can kick it down the line of what the transition has looked like. But so I was a high school rower, and so my whole career was 8 years in that world, and I absolutely loved it. The team culture, I think, is one of the things that really stuck around like through every moment of my life. I was a swimmer before I was a rower as well. And so having that community, I'm sure you can relate to this,
Mhm.
um, was really something that was important to me. And I found with rowing, it's individual, but also such a team sport at the same time. And
Mhm.
so for me, that's really what it means to be like an athlete, is kind of like serving, yes, on individual, you have your individual goals, but really that higher level of being on a team is what was really important for me. And I knew one of the things that I would deeply miss, of course, transitioning away from the sport.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's incredible. Well, congratulations on an amazing collegiate career. And I think you touched on it as well, is kind of those life skills now being a mother of a year and a half year old.
Yeah.
um, I think my biggest life lesson now that I've been removed for about 3.5 years is that I learned skills through the sport that are essential life skills that I don't think you can read in a book, that I don't think somebody can tell you. I don't think somebody can teach you. It's through the experience that you learn how to find commonalities with people that you never thought you could,
Mhm.
how to find ways to achieve things in a group, how to make sure that you're there for people and sense when people are in need. And I am just so grateful. I don't think in the moment and through my experiences playing collegiately and professionally, I don't think I ever realized how impactful it truly was until I was removed and then looked back and said, wow, there's just so many incredible people I met along the way, and so many different people that I met along the way, and so many different experiences that really shaped who I was, and who I plan to continue to become, and who I hope one day, I can raise my daughter to have and endure those same and similar life skills, in the sense of just treating people the way that you want to be treated, and finding the balance in life kind of always, even with its highs and lows. And so I can relate so much to your experiences in regards to how you felt as an individual and a team sport. It's very intriguing, by the way,
Mhm.
because
Yeah,
I
right.
an individual within a team sport as well. So yeah. So have you ever had any experiences, or have had friends or athletes with experiences in regards to where you felt like mental health was a topic, or maybe even for yourself, and something that you maybe experienced?
Yeah, for sure. I would say, honestly, the majority of athletes across different schools, across different sports, regions, ages, I would say it's a pretty, at least in my experience,
Mhm.
mental health has been something that is very important to athletes. And I think one of the things that I had to learn along the way in my own journey was um, kind of how to like validate my own journey, or how to appropriately stick up for myself and my teammates. And so I think one of the things, I think everyone in athletics acknowledges the role that mental health plays in athletics.
Yeah.
But I think the distinguishing factor is those who perhaps can't necessarily advocate for themselves
Mm-hmm.
appropriately, or don't know how to, or their teammates or anyone kind of in that space. And so that's really where I've seen myself grow the most. To get into it a little bit, my sophomore year was really when I saw the most growth and when I needed the most help for my mental health. So my fall semester sophomore year, I broke my rib through rowing. And it was through those probably first couple months where I really saw the dependency that I had on sport for my self-worth and my identity.
Mm-hmm.
And when that factor from rowing got removed, where, you're
Mm-hmm.
sidelined, I wasn't rowing, so like obviously, but I was rather in the athletic training facility away from my team and felt like I wasn't really contributing in the same way that they were. It was also going into winter conditioning. So of course
Mm-hmm.
it's the worst couple months. And so that's really when I started to very much internalize everything in my life. And I did not seek help when I should have. So I was depressed throughout I would say probably October of my sophomore year until late spring. And what that really taught me was I had a lot of difficulty asking for help, being vulnerable, sharing to other people, and having to be that person that I knew myself to be for others. So if that makes sense, like a listener, like I love being that role for someone else of
Mm-hmm.
like, let me help you. You can bounce ideas off of me. I promise I won't judge you. But when it came to me having to be in that seat, I absolutely hated it. And so that's where I've had to grow the most, and why I am sitting here in this program with Athletes for Hope as trying to be kind of that person that some of my teammates became, in that they recognized that I was really unhappy and they really pushed me to do something about it. And so I hope to kind of like pay it forward and do that the same way for other people. But I ask you kind of the same question, have you seen like either through your athletic communities or your teammates or anyone in athletics or yourself, what has your journey into like recognizing mental health been?
Yeah, no, and I appreciate you sharing your story
Mm-hmm.
and opening up about your story. But I think I actually would have to say that it wasn't until I was removed, and I can relate so much in regards to your identity that you spoke about earlier. I think when I retired, since I've been playing soccer since I was 5 years old, it's the only sport
Right.
I played. Everyone's like, "You never played another sport?" I'm like, "Nope, never
That's
played."
crazy. Wow. Oh my gosh.
Loved it so much that every year,
Yeah.
like, I'm just gonna play soccer. Like, I wasn't interested in anything else.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it would have helped me in other specific areas for skills, who knows?
I
I
think it
just
helped
loved it.
you.
I just
Yeah.
loved
It helped you greatly.
it.
That's awesome.
Loved it so much. And so when I went to the 1999 Women's World Cup in Pasadena, my mom had bought tickets early on, not knowing who would make it to the finals, obviously. Ends up it was USA versus China in front of 80,000 people.
Wow.
I remember showing up that day. It was so hot. And I remember just being like, Mom, put my hair in braids. I'm so hot. Like, this is crazy. There's so many people. And I'll never forget that day. It was the first day that I was like, I want to be one of those women out there. I want to play. I want to play professionally. I want people to come watch me doing what I love to do. And so that's kind of where it all started. And I essentially became someone who was constantly looking for, how do I stay on the right path? How do I continue to get good grades? How do I continue to surround myself with people that I know will help push me towards my dreams? And I know not a lot of young people are put in that scenario or have ever felt that at a very young age, of being that driven and not letting things, at least trying to not let things kind of uh, divert them at all. And
Mm-hmm.
so once I got drafted and obviously ended up having a 10-year career after that, when I retired, I didn't quite understand what life was like without running and making sure I was staying in shape, or training to make sure that I was the best version of myself for the team, or I didn't comprehend what was next. And I felt lost, and I felt that soccer was my identity. And I didn't know what my identity was outside of the sport. The sport
Mm-hmm.
has enhanced who I am and who I will continue to be. but I couldn't separate the two because I felt like I was such a part of the sport. And so I struggled for probably the first year and a half to better understand of like where my passion was. I got to do what I love for a living, right? Not a lot of people can say that. And it was the most amazing thing in the world. But when I left it, it was like, what's next, right?
Yeah.
And how do I figure out what my next passion is? And so I worked a few different jobs until landing this one, where I'm like, this is where I feel like I'm finally meant to be in the sense of giving back to the women's game and continuing to try to provide what I feel these women deserve in every aspect. Being in this league. And so I can relate very much to that. And I don't think it was until I removed myself that I finally, probably after a year, realized the mental impact that how I had to hide feelings where I was like really anxious or really upset and didn't feel like it was okay to be upset in that scenario. So I had to push it down and push it down and be like, babe, you're fine. Everything's going to be fine. Like, this is normal. You're going through this. And I didn't realize like how much I had actually like pushed down, whether right or wrong or needing help or not. I just hid it. I hid it all
Mm-hmm.
because I had to be someone that I felt that people saw on Instagram, saw on Twitter, and saw perform being the best version I could be all the time for whoever was watching me. And so I wanted to portray someone who I felt these people could look at and feel inspired by. And the truth is, you can be inspired by anyone. You can be inspired by someone just sharing, I'm not doing so good right now. I'm struggling a little bit. I need help. That's inspiring because you don't know who
Mm-hmm.
else feels that way and who else is maybe not comfortable sharing it, right? And so that's really when I first realized how the highs of the highs can be such an adrenaline rush, and the lows of the lows can just put you in your room for 2 days straight trying to figure out what you could have done better to ensure that that goal didn't go in, to put your team in the playoffs, to feel all the guilt even though there's 22 players, right?
Mm-hmm.
Somehow you find a way, they got by me to get the cross in. They scored the goal. It's my fault. If they never got by me, they would have never got the cross in. They would have never got the ball in the back of the net. So I think it's just, you put a lot of pressure because you expect perfection because you love what you do. And in reality, nobody's perfect. And once I came to that realization after retiring and the perspective I endured after having a child, I only wish I had that while I was playing, because I think I would have made a lot more light if I could in some scenarios that I felt like needed it.
Mm, that's super powerful. Thank you for sharing.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's so interesting because like soccer, you said you started at 5, right? Like
Yeah.
that has been your whole life. I think for me, because rowing was granted a great chunk of my life, but it was only 8 years in the whole grand scheme of things, right? So I did play other sports, but it's so amazing because rowing, you can't really do that. I mean, you have to be at least somewhat of like an adult to
Yeah.
start rowing, right? So it's usually high school you started out. But no, like that, I just love what you said about being surrounded by people who support your dreams or like are very like-minded, like you know, soccer. I have friends who started out that early as well, of just like you're so organized and you have the same mentality. And I think that feeds into the, you know, everything you were talking about of how dedicated you are and how you want to make sure that you are doing your best
Yeah.
because you know what is at stake and that it is that team of who has everyone has the same goals.
Yeah.
And when you were speaking, a question that popped into my mind, you kind of hit on it, but like the guilt of kind of like stepping away from your sport and having to process that's been something that I've really felt of in the past year of, okay, the guilt of now I don't have something that I'm
Yeah.
working towards outside of what I'm like supposed to be working towards inside of society, right? So like
Correct.
it's always, you know, school, your job, you're always like told I'm going to be working towards this. It's kind of expected, right? And rowing served that purpose for me where it's like, okay, I have something outside of my schoolwork or outside of a 9 to 5 that I'm also really dedicated towards. And so
Mm-hmm.
when that kind of got stripped away from me, I was like, oh my God, I'm not doing enough to like perfect
Yeah.
myself or to become a better
Yes.
person. Right. Like, did you, okay. So I see you nodding your head. Did you feel the
Yes.
same way with that?
Yes, absolutely. And I think as athletes, I'm curious to hear if you can relate to this, but like I've only known being the best version of myself for the group is exerting myself all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's
Yep.
making sure that I'm giving everything I have all of the time, because that's the best version of me. And if I'm chosen on the day, then great. But if I'm not, I'm making sure that I'm at least preparing the team that's chosen. Right. And so
Mm-hmm.
in order to do that, you have to exert so much. And I think that was the tough part for me in a transition is if I can't move my legs anymore and my arms anymore, how do I exert myself so much mentally to make sure? And I struggled with that because any job I got, I was working like 9 to 9 p.m. And it's like, whoa. But it was like, I had that athlete in me of like, well, I need to exert everything I have every single day. So if
Mm-hmm.
I'm not doing that, I'm not doing the best for myself, and I'm not doing the best for the group. I'm not doing the best for the club I'm working with. And so I got extremely mentally drained very quickly because I never stopped working. I never took a day off. And I just continued
Yeah.
to exert everything I had. And it's like, that's all I've ever known. Right. And physically, when you're out there and you do it for an hour and a half to 2 hours a day, and then you go home and rest the rest of the day, obviously it's very different than having a full-blown workload, managing 13 people at the club soccer level, overseeing the entire club, dealing with club parents, making sure that you're making certain tournaments. Like all of a sudden it was like, whoa, I'm going to get in a bad place really quickly if I don't slow down. And so that transition for me in particular, I'm not sure if you can relate at all, but that transition for me in particular has been one where I'm like, I need to sleep. I need to take care of myself. I need to take days off. I need to shut my phone off. I need to not check my email 24/7. Because I also think we live in much of a society now where it's just you have access to everyone 24/7. It's not
Yep.
like, oh, sorry, I didn't get to your email. Like if you send an email in the morning, you're expecting a response at night. You know what I
Mm-hmm.
mean? So we
Yeah.
also live, I believe, in the society of like instant like need for a
Mm-hmm.
response or gratification or satisfaction. And so I feel like I'm so guilty of it. And I've realized now after 3.5 years how to create some sort of boundaries,
Mm-hmm.
and how to allow myself to be the best version of myself, but also take care of myself. And I think as
Yeah.
a society, we're starting to get away from that in a sense of how do we take care of ourselves, and how do I give my daughter all the time that she deserves and I deserve to give her as her mother, but also be the best at my job.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know
Yeah.
that, I'm not sure if you can relate to that, but I definitely feel when you're just talking about what you're talking about, just all of a sudden click that, yes, I'm so used to exerting and taking a fitness test and making sure I'm running the mile 2 times a week so that when we do the mile test, I can complete it and hopefully in the top of the group. Right.
Yes, yeah. No, I completely relate, right? Like, and I think any athlete who's listening to this will very much understand what we're saying in that, like, exhaustion and
Hmm.
effort
Hmm.
starts to equate to like what we perceive as like hard work and dedication.
Yep.
And so, I mean, that boundary work, like, I think that's what it really comes down to. Of now, I like catch myself, and I don't on my phone, I do not have email notifications. We use Slack as well. Yeah, I am like, I if I am not on my laptop, I'm not doing work. And
Hmm.
so and that it also helps because the company I'm at is phenomenal with like
Great.
work culture and really taking care of yourself. So I'm blessed to have that aspect as well. I think that's what kind of makes me it's helped me tremendously out of college, having those boundaries set in place. So, but I do find where it gets a little bit murkier is where I am like on my own ambition or another project that I'm
Hmm.
working on. So I'll tie in, I have a podcast. And so like I find that if I'm doing work for that, I'm way more willing to blur those
Yep.
boundaries of I'm just like one more email, like reach
Yep.
out to one more person, do one
Right.
more hour of work. Like I'm way more willing when it's my own time and my own sacrifice. And there's not really anyone who is
Mm.
telling me like, close the laptop.
Yeah.
I'm like, it is a way
Yeah.
a way slippier slope. I don't know if that's exactly how you say it, but yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I definitely relate to all of that. And
Aw.
I don't know if I think there's for setting boundaries, there's something that's different for everyone. So like I
Yeah.
notice it has to be kind of, I have to catch myself or when I'm like overworking or when I have different dialogues in my head or my mindset or anything, I have to very much be on top of myself to catch my thoughts and be like, okay, no, like if you're getting tired, just
Yeah.
close the laptop. Like
Yeah.
subtle reminders or be very in tune with what I'm feeling and
Yeah.
be like calendar block or anything like that of,
So true.
like boundaries.
Absolutely. And there's sometimes that I get to the point where it's like, at this point, I'm just going to stare at the screen and I'm not going to get anything done. So I need to close it. I need to open it back up in the morning. But it is interesting, like obviously in the role that I am in now, in reference to being a coach and not a player, like the stress that I felt as a player and the mental and physical stress that I felt as a player, and also some of the glorious things that I felt as a player. I do feel on this side in a much different capacity, but it's very much so like, I need to make sure I have all this information. I need to make sure it's very clear. I need to make sure that I'm constantly, supporting. And luckily, I work in such a phenomenal environment as well, where I just absolutely adore our head coach and just think so highly of him and everything that he attempts to bring to this club. But there's the constant weight on me now of, am I giving them everything that they need all the time? Am I giving them too much? Am I talking to specific players a little bit more than other, and you just get in this spiral of, I know my intentions, and I know my intentions are pure, and I know I will do anything for anyone at this club to ensure that they feel like they are continuing to develop. And I have to constantly remind myself that after 10 years in the league and being a very fresh coach at the professional level, I have to constantly remind myself that. And sometimes I can get so overwhelmed because I want to be so good at what I do. And I want to support the head coach so much because I care about everything that he does. And I just respect and support everything that he's trying to create, that I put this pressure on me sometimes where he's like, hey, babe, it's okay. I'm like, okay, I thought it was going to be,
Okay.
But I expect that same perfection that I expected as a player in this role. And I see myself as a former athlete in my current role having that same weight sometimes, and being a little bit more in tune of when to calm myself down and just know I'm not going to accomplish anything now. I've been working on this for 12 hours. Just take a rest, get up in the morning and continue to look at it and continue to analyze it and continue to make sure that you're giving it everything you have. But at some point, giving everything you have isn't 24/7. It's not. And I think that's what we think. And so even in the role that I'm currently in, sometimes I'm continuing to have to remind myself of, what is too much and what's too little. I think it's different for everybody. And I think that's where the lines can be a little bit blurred. And all of a sudden, 7 days later, you haven't done anything for yourself in regards to meditation, yoga, reading a book, if it's just 10 pages, writing, going out for a coffee, like whatever it is for you to continue to manage the stress or the release of it, right? Like I said, now on away trips, I'm going to jog every game day. A lot of where I came from, obviously as an athlete, you can relate, is exercising. And a lot of my stress and my release of stress and my release of anything that was going on was done through exercising. And then I take a coaching role and I don't work out anymore. I don't run. I don't jog. I'm giving everything, my heart and my soul and my brain and everything that I can into this role. And so I started to realize, on game days, I'm going to start going for a jog, because usually, our games are in the evening or in the afternoon. So I have the morning time. And I realized that helped me a ton. And I
Wow.
couldn't quite pinpoint what is it that I need in regards to some sort of like release in a sense, and an opportunity for me to reset. And I think understanding what that may be for some people is different. Maybe it's, knitting, crocheting, reading, writing, coffee.
Yeah.
It's different for everybody, right? Because we're all different human beings. But I think finding that has been a huge, huge tool for me in regards to how I can turn off just for a little bit.
And I think that's a great point that you make, is that it is different for everyone, like what works for you. It's, it's part of the reason why I love this space of mental health and continuing these conversations, because like someone might hear this conversation and be like, oh my God, I've never thought about that, or like had that perspective, right? So maybe what works for us works for them. But I think to also play, like, I think that exact point of what works for everyone won't work, or what works for some people won't work for everyone, of like the game that you play is like, what's too much, what's too little. That's why it's this conversation, like transitioning away from sport and just mental health in general, is so difficult to like pinpoint, because it isn't it's not like, oh, you want to be a better like runner, go run.
Yeah.
Here's a training plan
Yeah.
that you can do, right? Like, so I
Yeah.
think mindset training and like all of those wonderful things that are newer is they're coming along, but there really isn't
Yeah.
like a standard practice, and especially not in the world of athletics where it's like you have
Mm-hmm.
to complement, you know, the physical body and the
Yeah.
mental mind. So it's I completely, I mean,
Yeah.
I'm the same way. Like exercise is a release and whatever I'm feeling in
Yeah.
that way. And I
Yeah.
noticed for a while I stopped working out like right after I graduated. I was like, oh my gosh, yay, I'm, you know, like
Yeah.
done. And I thought like the transition from sport that I needed was not having practice every day and not
Yeah.
having that added stress. But I realized I felt so much worse
Mm.
in almost every category in my life. And so now I'm choosing the workouts that I'm doing, but I'm dedicating myself to working out every day because I know that's what I need and what I'm used to.
Love that. I love that. And you recognize that. And I think that that's a part. Sorry, my daughter, she's like, Mom. She-
It's real life.
she's loving life with grandma, but she just misses mom. But yeah, I think like another piece to it too that I've realized through transitioning from a player into the coaching world is obviously that weight that you carry as a player. You're constantly competing to be in that starting 11 constantly. Like you want to be
Hmm.
considered, you want to be looked at, and you want to compliment your teammates. And you're competing Monday through Friday. Once the team's chosen, you're now become a different role and a different supportive role of, okay, I hope I'm chosen to come in and infect the game in any capacity I can. If I'm not, I need to be there for my teammates. I need to do everything I can. And you're constantly changing these roles, and your
Yeah.
roles could be ever changing throughout a year, throughout a season, throughout several years. And having that mindset and that freshness and being around those people that you feel help build your character and build you to be that role in whatever role you're given is so important. And now that I'm on the flip side, I'm on the other side of the table, if you will. I've realized, gosh, man, if I only had a peek at this when I was playing, and the amount of times I thought my coaches shut the door and talked about me and said that I wasn't good enough and said that I didn't deserve to start and said this and said that. Those conversations don't happen, and we get in our own heads of like, this is what happened, this is what I saw, I'm going to put this story together, I'm going to make this story, I'm going to hold it true. I also heard somebody whispering, and so I'm going to grab that sentence and throw it in here as well, because I'm sure they were talking about me too. And
Hmm.
I just realized that I created a lot of my own narratives that didn't even exist when I played, of like
Yeah.
why I played, why I didn't play, why I traveled, why I didn't travel. Maya was considered for, a starting position and played a starting position. And the next week, not considered when I thought I played well. And you just kind of put a lot of these narratives that now I've experienced on the other side. And I think that's my biggest thing. And that's the part that I try and help with the most in the role that I've been given as a former player in an assistant coaching role is how do I be there for them and just look them in the eye sometimes and be able to recognize, I'm not going to be able to catch everyone, but can I be able to recognize when they're struggling and just tell them, hey, just don't overthink it.
Yeah.
Because we
Yeah.
expect this perfection. We expect this all the time that it's not realistic. It's
Mm-mm.
not. We're going to have good days. We're going to have bad days. But guess what? We can try and be the best person that we could possibly be for ourselves and for the people around us. And
Yeah.
that's the controllable, right? The
Hmm.
controllable is never performance. We wish it was. I
That'd be so, it'd be a different world, right? Yeah.
run here, and I'd make all the perfect runs and score all the perfect goals. It's not real. It's not
Mhm.
real. And I think once you come to that understanding, and now I'm seeing it on the other side, and then I have a daughter that brings the perspective of soccer is not my identity. Being a
Right.
putting food in her mouth, putting a roof over her head, my whole perspective's changed. I no longer live, breathe, eat soccer. I love it. It's not life.
That's a very important distinction. Yes. And I love hearing that too. I think it's wonderful that you have the coach perspective, like the other side, right? The other seat
Yeah.
at the table. And we of course love to try and make sense of everything. So
Yeah.
like piecing together those little points where you're like, this all must be
Yes.
related, you know,
Yep.
like, and sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's
Mm-hmm.
literally so random.
Yep.
And so yeah, and I wanted to ask so what would be kind of like one thing from the coaching perspective that like you would want athletes maybe listening to this conversation or you know, your own athletes, something that you tell them that you hope that they take with them?
Yeah, no, it's a fantastic question. And I would definitely say to not overthink. That's
Mm,
been probably the biggest word I've used, because I can see it in their eyes. I can see it in their body language. I can see, oh, I'm just not going to play. Like, I haven't been chosen for this team. I'm on this team again. I'm with, oh, just don't overthink. And if at any point you feel like you're struggling, don't be afraid to go knock on the door and say, "Can I just have a quick minute?" I'm in one of those moments. I'm overthinking. I've tried to lean on the people around me. I've tried to lean on my family. I'm just in a position right now where I'm overthinking a lot and I just need a little bit of validation, because I'm searching for it at the moment.
Yeah.
And I think that's another key piece, right? Is that when I played in Japan for 2.5 years, when the first league folded, I went over there and the coach didn't speak English. And so I was constantly looking for feedback. Like, am I doing well? Am I not doing well? And he couldn't talk to me. He didn't understand
Right.
what I was asking. So he couldn't, if you didn't understand that, he didn't know how to provide like any sort of feedback for me. And that was the first time I realized that I had relied on, my coaches and my family and my friends for so long to provide me that validity, if you will. And was I good or was I not good? And for the first time in my career, I got to assess who I was, what I was good at and what I wasn't good at. And it was on my shoulders. I've never felt that responsibility before. And I did for the first time at 24 years old.
Mhm.
And so that's another one for me is, can you take a look at it and see, what am I good at? What makes me me? Because I think that's what's so beautiful about sport, whatever sport you play, is everybody's so unique and everyone's so different. And that's what makes the game so beautiful. If they were all the same, it'd be boring to watch. You wouldn't sell seats. You
Yeah.
wouldn't, you know what I mean? It's
Mhm.
it's fun because we're all so different, and what makes you you is different from somebody else, and what you provide is what is different from someone else, whether it's in the locker room, on the pitch, wherever. And I
Mhm.
think understanding that you are different and that it's good to be different and it's okay to be different and it's beautiful to be different. I think you start to come into your own of understanding that it's okay.
Right.
Really good at what I do because I'm me
Mhm.
and it's different, And
Yeah.
so I think that that was definitely something that I experienced throughout my career of just better understanding who I was and not necessarily consistently relying on somebody to tell me, but having that courage that when I did need it, I was okay to lean on people around me that I trust, or knock on that door.
Yeah.
But
That's
it's
really special.
a very good question.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that made me think. I think the one, or not the one, because I hope there's a lot of takeaways, right? But one thing that I like to live by and that I would like to impart on other athletes, would be, to be helpful, one, to your other teammates, and make sure that you're checking in on them
Mm,
so that when and if, but probably when the time comes
mm,
that you have to be that other person who is asking for help, you feel comfortable in doing so.
mm.
Um, yeah, I'm a big believer in find your people and have your relationship be to the point where they feel like they can trust you with anything so that when you need them, you can trust them with your
Yeah,
vulnerabilities, your fears, all of that, um, all of that less flowery, but just as necessary parts of life.
yeah, I totally
Mhm.
agree. I love that. And
Mhm.
what does it mean to you to be a mental health ambassador? So having experienced what you've gone through and having seen what you've gone through, in the sense of, I'm sure you saw teammates and families and friends in some capacity, struggling in the mental health area. What does it mean to you to be a mental health ambassador for Athletes for Hope?
Yeah, to me, it really is about sharing my own narrative and vulnerabilities so that, or in the hopes that stigma and, any negative connotations with mental health, or, the fear of people speak about their mental health for, ulterior gains or motives, to
Mm-hmm.
eradicate any of that. I think because there's so many aspects of mental health that are tied into like who you are as a person and like your identity and your perspective and your, honestly, like your soul. I think it can be, very difficult to open up, but that's what it means to me to be an advocate, is to make sure that if I was a younger athlete or even an older one, that if I found someone who had a similar narrative to me, hearing them speak about it would make it easier for me.
Mhm.
So that's what it means for me. Now, what does it mean to you to be a mental health advocate?
I love that. And I love what you touched on earlier, because I think you're spot on. I think the key to it all is understanding that you don't know what somebody's going through. And I try and
Mm-hmm.
keep that in every day. When I get cut off on the road, I'm like, I have no idea what they're going through. They could be rushing home to a relative that needs them right now. You
Mm-hmm.
just never know what someone's going through. And whether you sprained your ankle and we're out 2 weeks and totally fine, it doesn't mean that somebody else that sprained their ankle is out 2 weeks is going to be totally fine. And I
Yeah.
think you're spot on of having those people around you that you feel that you could be vulnerable with and express, when you're not feeling well. Um, and also having the opportunity to recognize when people are going through things and being able to just pull them, hey, you okay? Yeah, I'm okay.
Mm-hmm.
Just want to check in on you.
Yeah.
There's nothing like, I think we can all contest to that, when somebody just sends you a message, just says, are you doing okay? And you're like, wow, it's so powerful and it's so simple.
Yeah.
But yeah, I am doing okay. I'm just struggling just a little bit, but I'm fine. Right. But
Mm-hmm.
fact that somebody recognized there is some power to it. And so I do appreciate you sharing that, because I think it's incredibly beautiful the way that you worded it. And I think for me, I love being a part of it, because I think that now, as I mentioned earlier, from being removed for as long as I have been now, I realized the toll, and I realized that it wasn't a word that necessarily people used or felt okay to use. The word
Yeah.
health is like, and I want to be a part of changing that narrative, much like you are, in that, yes, it's okay to talk about it. And yes, we're here to help each other. And yes, we do feel sad sometimes. And I feel like a lot of times I just had to change that. And I had to change it because I needed to be big and better and, work harder. And, I just hit it all. I hit it
Mm-hmm.
all. And so I think there's, obviously balance to it, but I think it's so important to just talk about it and be okay to talk about it. And so that's probably the biggest thing for me is I look forward to continuing to bring awareness and to discuss the just overall mental health. And I think it's very important.
Yeah, there's a lot of powerful conversations that can happen that can make a movement, right? So
Absolutely.
I'm right there with you. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for everything, Mariah. I appreciate you taking the time out, and I'm glad we got to meet and chat about it. And I obviously hope that we can continue to stay in touch. But I do appreciate your perspective and all that you have brought to this conversation, and all that you have brought to just the world in general, because obviously, you've competed at a very high level, and you, I'm sure, have inspired a lot of people along the way, whether you know it or not. So it was a pleasure to speak with you today.
Well, thank you, Bev. I mean, that's very sweet. I don't know if I can follow that up. But no, this has been an honor. I think also too, it's a relief to hear from a like coach's point of view as well, as an athlete,
Mm.
um, or a former athlete, I should say, like that has a lasting impact. And I can only imagine the impact that you are making on everyone that you coach right now, currently, and everyone that you've been on the field with, off the field with. And so
Thank you.
I'm honestly excited to stay connected and continue learning from you, because I've had so many great things that I know I'll take with me from this conversation. And with that, I'm so thankful to Athletes for Hope for joining us together to have this conversation, because it's been the highlight of my night and week and month.
Yay.
So yeah.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for everything, Mariah. And like I said, we'll definitely be in touch. And I second that. I'm glad that we were able to come together for Athletes for Hope and hopefully inspire anybody that's watching this. And
Mhm.
I hope that we continue to do more together.
Yeah. Yay.
Okay. I'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Sounds good. Bye, Bev.